Gladio, così come è stata definita, individuata, descritta oggi, è una componente di quelle che io ho sempre chiamato strutture parallele. C'è un esercito invisibile, non predisposto per una battaglia, una guerra esterna contro un ipotetico invasore, ma addestrato ad operare all'interno contro quello che in tutti gli ambienti militari è stato sempre definito una quinta colonna dell'Unione Sovietica, il Partito Comunista e le forze di estrema sinistra ad esso collegate.
That was the time when the Second World War was over. Europe was devastated, and most strategists in Europe actually feared an occupation of Western Europe by the communists in the years to come. So they thought we must prepare something like a guerrilla network which could then be operated in case of an invasion. So the primary thinking for creating such secret units was we must have a guerrilla unit ready in case of occupation.
Queste strutture parallele hanno impiegato elementi dell'estrema destra per un motivo molto semplice. È in corso una battaglia anticomunista. Nel 1945 non è finita la seconda guerra mondiale ed è iniziata la terza guerra mondiale.
Now, international terrorism coming from the Soviet Union wasn't merely a construct of ideology. It wasn't just projected and, this is a threat, this is something we have to be scared of. It was also a construct of real-life covert operations. And this is absolutely crucial to understand. Through to the late 1980s, a highly secretive subsections of different intelligence services, British, American and Western European, participated in a very sophisticated NATO-backed operation to engineer terrorist attacks inside Western Europe, which could then be blamed on the Soviet Union. Now, this operation originated from within MI6 and the CIA. In fact, Winston Churchill gave the original order to set up what was called the Secret Stay-Behind Network. And the idea was to galvanize public opinion against left-wing policies and parties when it was considered that they were getting too popular. And the reason I bring this up is because if you're looking at, a lot of people talk about this idea of false flag terrorism. And if you use the term false flag terrorism in mainstream media, you immediately get laughed out of the room as a kook, a deluded fantasist. But what does false flag terrorism mean? False flag terrorism is when you carry out a terrorist attack and you wave a flag which is not your own. That's what a covert operation is about. A covert operation is precisely to carry out an operation where you don't have to take responsibility, where responsibility can be pinned on another party and no one can trace it back to the CIA. That's what it's about. So this is classic false flag terrorism, and it's documented by historical scholarship.
Go back to 1969, go to the Italian city Milano, this is in northern Italy, and everybody's shopping for Christmas presents and stuff, and suddenly a lot of bombs go off, and they kill people all over the place, and everybody's scared, and you have this effect of terror. The first effect of terror is fear, it spreads all over the place. And then as a second effect, you need somebody who is responsible for this. And then the message comes out, these were the communists. These were the communists, these were the communists. And people sort of believe this. And now, in 2001 or 2 it was, I think, you have a trial in Italy, and you find out it was not the communists, it was right-wing people, people from the Catholics, from the other camp. So it was a false flag operation. And then you have an Italian general from the intelligence service, Giandelia Moletti, his name is, and he says, it's true we did this, but we did this together with the CIA. In a small little village called Peteano, and there, you had a few police officers receiving a call saying there's a little car at the woods and why don't you check it out, it seems to have been stolen. Then the police officers go there, and once they're close enough, the car just blows up and they're all dead. This was in 1972, and we found out only in 1984, and that's 12 years later, that in fact it was a right-wing Catholic, an Italian Catholic, who staged this in cooperation with the Italian military secret service.
The man actually responsible for the Peteano bombing was Vincenzo Vinciguerra, He was a member of right-wing terrorist groups Avanguardia Nazionale and Ordine Nuovo. To make it look like communists were responsible, he'd scratched a 5-pointed star, the symbol of the Red Brigades, into the car's bonnet. During the investigation, an Italian explosives expert forged a report into what the bomb was made of. Also a member of Ordine Nuovo, the expert said that the explosive used was the one favoured by the Red Brigades, when in fact it was from a Gladio stash. Once his guilt had been established, and he was no longer protected by the security services, Vinciguerra became very candid about how Gladio operated.
Bisognava attaccare i civili, quello che è il popolo, le donne, i bambini, le persone innocenti e strane ad ogni gioco politico, per una ragione semplice, perché bisognava obbligare questa gente, l'opinione pubblica italiana, a rivolgersi allo Stato, a rivolgersi al regime per chiedere maggiore sicurezza. Il ruolo della destra d'Italia è stato proprio questo. Si è messa al servizio di apparati di Stato che hanno alimentato una strategia che giustamente è stata definita della tensione, in quanto bisognava portare la gente ad accettare in qualsiasi momento, nell'arco di un trentennio, dal 1960 al 1985-86, la possibilità di uno stato d'emergenza. Quindi la gente avrebbe barattato molto volentieri parte della sua libertà con una sicurezza, con la sicurezza di poter camminare sulle strade, viaggiare sui treni, salire sugli aerei, entrare in banca. Questa è la logica politica che sta dietro tutte le stragi, che rimangono impunite proprio perché lo Stato non può condannare se stesso o proclamare se stesso colpevole di quello che ha fatto. Quando io parlo di ideale, io parlo oggi di un ideale di verità, non è più un ideale ideologico, che io sono giunto alla conclusione non da oggi, che il fascismo è stata un'esperienza storica che è definitivamente tramontata, che è stata artefattemente mantenuta in vita. Quindi diciamo un ideale di verità rivolto non soltanto al passato ma anche al presente e al futuro. Questo ideale di verità esclude che io possa pentirmi di ciò che ho fatto, perché ciò che ho fatto, giusto o sbagliato che possa essere giudicato, l'ho fatto credendo profondamente e continuo a credere.
This strategic relationship between NATO, neo-fascist terrorist groups and the CIA culminated in an attack on Bologna train station in August 1980. 18 kilos of military plastic explosive were detonated in the second-class waiting room. Over 80 people were killed and hundreds injured.
C'è una trentina di morti, è una notizia allarmistica oppure vera? Comunque ci mi ha detto che ci sono molti morti, molti feriti. Cosa ti devo dire? Che stai bene? Ehi, telefono alla mia discrezione, digli così che io sono partito per lui. Abbiamo bisogno di sangue, mi ha lasciato il numero e ha detto che possiamo chiamare. Attenzione base stazione, date rose se copiate il falli.
A series of trials ensued in Italy. It wasn't until 1995, 15 years after the bombing, that a conclusive verdict was reached. 2 members of a neo-fascist group were convicted of the bombing. Also convicted for diverting the investigation were 2 Italian intelligence agents who were members of the P2 Masonic Lodge. The Grand Master of that lodge, Licio Gelli, was also convicted of conspiring to divert the investigation. It became clear that P2 was not just a Masonic order, but a CIA-funded parallel government.
La loggia P2 non è un centro di potere occulto, è un centro di potere palese, occulto per l'opinione pubblica, non per lo Stato e i vertici dello Stato, che ha svolto la sua funzione ben precisa in questa battaglia anticomunista e che io considero una di quelle strutture parallele che possa equiparare a Gladio, non con compiti militari, ma con compiti di politica interna, di sovversione interna.
A list of members of the lodge was found in a raid on Licio Gelli's house in 1981. Among the 962 names were those of the heads of all three intelligence services, 48 MPs, industrialists, bankers, media moguls, journalists, civil servants, judges, military officials, and Silvio Berlusconi.
La strage di Bologna avviene in un momento in cui massimo è l'allarme del regime e l'allarme dei servizi di sicurezza italiani, alleate e nordamericane, per la potenza elettorale raggiunta dal Partito Comunista Italiano. Quindi la strage di Bologna, anche questa, risponde, come tutte le altre stragi, alla logica di uno Stato che, non sapendo più come fronteggiare un nemico politico, ricorre ai mezzi estremi, ai mezzi della violenza da attribuire ora agli estremisti di sinistra, ora agli estremisti di destra, per giustificare un suo eventuale intervento. Non c'è altra verità sulla strage di Bologna.
Also found in the raid on Licio Gelli's house was US Army Field Manual 3031. Appendix B of this manual explains the Gladio strategy of covert warfare. And
the smoking gun memo that Ganser cites in his book is from the Pentagon's Defense Intelligence Agency. And this was appended to the Italian parliamentary inquiry, and it says here, it's worth quoting at some length, it says, "There may be times when host country governments show passivity or indecision in the face of communist subversion, and according to the interpretation of the US Secret Services, do not react with sufficient effectiveness." In other words, your population is, kind of getting apathetic, they're getting too pro-lefty. US Army intelligence must have the means of launching special operations which will convince host country governments and public opinion of the reality of the insurgent danger. To reach this aim, US Army intelligence should seek to penetrate the insurgency by means of agents on special assignment, with the task of forming special action groups among the most radical elements of the insurgency. This is really important. In case it has not been possible to successfully infiltrate such agents into the leadership of the rebels, instrumentalize extreme leftist organizations for one's own ends in order to achieve the above described target. So the methodology that is advocated here is crucial, that you actually take existing networks, you infiltrate them, you radicalize them, and you mobilize them, or you create them.
The Americans have dismissed the document as a Soviet forgery, but the strategy is in keeping with that described in the Northwoods memo and in numerous other declassified documents from covert operations.
I never heard such a thing, frankly. I don't know the origin of the statement, and you can find any statement in any country. I mean, you can find jackass statements anywhere.
I suspect it is an authentic document. I don't doubt it. I never saw it, but it's the kind of special forces military operations that are described.
Era un documento che mi consegnò un mio carissimo amico che faceva parte della CIA prima di rientrare in sede. Disse: prenditi questo, quando hai un ritaglio di tempo leggitelo.
Le Brigate Rosse sono state infiltrate con notevoli difficoltà, perché erano una struttura molto chiusa e direi anche efficiente, ma tuttavia ci sono state anche delle infiltrazioni notevoli che ci hanno portato a ottimi risultati.
Oggi un uomo si ritrova in tutto, non mai in una battaglia ideologica propria. Si proclama nazionalsocialista, ma in realtà il suo capo, Pino Bauti, ha lavorato per lo Stato Maggiore delle Forze Armate nell'altra guerra del tempo, è stato un esperto del SIG e ha reclutato uomini per queste strutture parallele.
Now this whole process that continued up to the late 1980s generated immense fear throughout Western Europe. I mean, Ganser documents very real bombings, very real civilian casualties in Italy, Spain, Germany, France, Turkey, Greece. The EU actually issued a resolution on this in the early 1990s. This process was instrumental in legitimizing the crackdown on domestic left-leaning dissent inside Western Europe and legitimizing interventionism abroad throughout the Cold War.